The stars were quiet that day as a single human shuttle drifted into the neutral zone between two great alien powers, and it was small, almost forgotten in the black sky. No weapons, no shields, not even a proper signal, just floating slowly like a piece of space junk. In the control room of the Krixer battleship, the crew laughed as the shuttle appeared on their screens. The admiral named Varnock leaned forward, his eyes cold and sharp. He watched the tiny object move across the stars, and he smiled a slow and cruel smile. "Is this it?" he asked, his voice filled with pride and mockery. "This is what humans send into our space, a broken can of metal. Do they think we will fear this?" His officers also laughed. One of them zoomed in on the screen, showing the shuttle close-up. It looked weak, its hull scratched, and dark parts of it looked burned, and the engines barely had any power left. "It is no threat," Admiral Varnock, the officer, said. "We detect no weapons, no defense systems, and no energy field. It is flying on minimal life support." Varnock nodded his eyes, never leaving the screen. "Humans think they're clever," he said. "But this is not clever, this is sad. Maybe they're sending us a gift, or maybe a trap. But either way, we will take it." "Send a boarding team," he ordered. "Take control of that thing, bring it back to our hangar, and see what tricks the humans are playing." A group of Krixer soldiers prepared quickly. They were tall, with sharp armor and glowing blue eyes. They entered a small transport ship and flew toward the shuttle. With ease, the shuttle did not move. It did not change course. It did not respond to any call. "Strange," the lead soldier said as they floated closer. "It is not even trying to hide or run away. This feels too easy." They docked their ship to the shuttle and opened the door inside. It was cold and dark. The lights were low, and the air smelled old and dry. No one came to meet them. There were no voices, no movement, nothing but silence. The soldiers moved in slowly, their weapons ready. They walked through the narrow halls, looking in every corner, every room, every vent, but found no one. "No crew here," the second soldier said. "No signs of life at all, just machines and wires and dust." But then they found something strange. In the center of the shuttle was a chamber filled with unknown equipment. It looked human, but also different, like something built a long time ago and forgotten. One of the soldiers touched a control panel, and suddenly the lights turned red. A deep hum filled the air, and a countdown began in a language none of the Krixer knew. "Was this?" the lead soldier shouted. Pull back now." But the door slammed shut behind them, locking them inside, and the ship began to shake. The countdown was getting faster, and the power inside the chamber was rising. Outside the shuttle, Admiral Varnock stood watching from the safety of his battleship. He saw the red light glowing from the shuttle windows, and his smile faded. "So we have lost contact with the boarding team," the officer said. "The shuttle is charging something we do not understand." "Move back," Varnock shouted. "All ships fall back now." But it was too late. The shuttle pulsed once with a bright blue light, and then released a wave of strange energy. It spread like a silent storm across space, touching every Krixer ship in range. Their systems failed in seconds. Engines went cold, weapons died, lights flickered and shut off. Even life support stopped working. The great fleet of the Krixer was suddenly blind, deaf, and powerless. No ships were destroyed, no one died. But the message was clear. This shuttle was not weak. It was not forgotten. It was not a mistake. It was a test. Far away on Earth, Admiral Rourke stood at a high window, looking out at the stars. He held a small device in his hand, and when it buzzed, he smiled. "So they found it," he said softly. "After all these years, it still works." Behind him, a younger officer stepped forward. "Sir, what was that shuttle?" The Krixer are demanding answers. They are calling it human attack. "Let them scream," Rourke replied. "That shuttle was never part of the fleet. It was a warning, something old from time when Earth built ships not to fight, but to stop fights before they began. And now," he said, looking up again, "the stars are awake, and soon the real message will arrive." In the dark of space, the shuttle floated still and quiet again. Its job was done, its trap complete, its signal now heading to a place far below the waves of Earth where something very old was starting to wake. The silence inside the shuttle was not normal. It was the kind of silence that felt thick and heavy, like it was watching, waiting, holding its breath. The Krixer boarding team stood just inside the door, their boots pressing down on dust that had not been touched for years, if not longer. The light from their helmets scanned across walls that were once silver, but now faded to a dull gray. Some parts of the shuttle looked melted, some looked frozen, and none of it made sense. No heat, no sound, no crew, no blood, no signs of struggle, said the lead soldier, whose name was Rollick, his voice calm, but sharp through the communicator. Something is wrong here, something is very wrong. The shuttle smelled of metal and decay. The air tasted old, like it had been trapped for centuries. Even their filters picked up strange readings from the walls, as if radiation had once passed through, but then vanished without a trace. One soldier touched the wall, and it felt warm only for a second, then cold again. Another one opened a hatch and found only wires and dust, but the wires were not standard human tech. They were layered with symbols and patterns that no one on the team could read. They looked more like writing than wiring. "This is not just a shuttle," whispered Rollick. "This is a message, or maybe a machine pretending to be something simple, but hiding something dark." They moved deeper into the ship, passing empty seats, twisted frames, flickering screens that blinked for 1 second, then died again. One soldier reached out to a control panel and wiped off the dust. The screen behind it flashed and showed a face, not a human face, not alien, either something in between, made of light and lines, its eyes glowing like fire, its mouth not moving, but still speaking. The words made no sound, but their meaning cut straight into their minds, a cold voice in their heads, not loud, but deep and steady, warning them, repeating one line again and again: "You are not invited." Suddenly the lights in the shuttle turned red. Sirens began to hum low and deep. The ship began to shake, but not from motion, more like it was alive and breathing. Rollick turned to his team. "Fall back, get out now. Something is waking up in here, something that does not want us here." But the shuttle had its own plan. The door behind them shut. Without sound, the lock sealed itself with no visible mechanism. They tried to cut it, but their tools sparked and died. The hallway around them changed. It seemed longer than before, wider or darker, or maybe both. The walls began to move, like something behind them was pushing forward, pressing the metal from the inside out. One of the soldiers panicked and fired his weapon. The bolt of energy hit the wall and vanished. No mark, no burn, no hole. The wall absorbed it like it had never happened. The lights turned from red to blue, then purple, then white, and then nothing. Total blackness fell over the team, and only their helmet lights remained weak and flickering. Then the floor dropped beneath them, not fast, not like falling, but more like sinking. They did not scream, but they all felt that the shuttle was no longer just a place. It was doing something to them. It was showing them something from long ago. Rollick saw visions flash across the darkness, stars burning, ships exploding, humans screaming, but not from fear, from rage. They were standing on broken planets, holding the Earth flag in one hand and strange weapons in the other, their eyes glowing with the same light as the face on the screen. "This is old war tech," whispered Rollick. "Older than any Krixer record, older than the Empire, older than even the first contact between species, maybe even older than space travel itself. This is not a shuttle. This is a weapon sleeping in plain sight." The team reached the central chamber again, and now it looked different. The strange machines were humming softly, glowing with slow pulses like a heartbeat in metal and light. There was a chair in the middle, now not a throne, not a pilot seat, something else. It was shaped for a human, but the design was alien. Wires ran into it and out of it and into the walls and into the floor. One soldier stepped closer and reached toward it, then stopped, his hand hovering in the air. "I feel like something is pulling me," he said, not with force, but with memory, like this thing knows me, like it knows all of us. Before anyone could answer, the shuttle shook again, not from inside, but from something outside. The Krixer fleet was trying to recover their systems. They were trying to contact the shuttle to demand status, but all channels were silent, all sensors useless, all controls frozen. Admiral Varnock was pacing across the command deck, his hands clenched, his eyes burning with frustration and fear. "How can one shuttle disable a fleet?" he shouted. "How is this possible? Someone answer me." No one could. They were all just watching the screen where the shuttle floated calm and still and deadly, a small blue pulse now visible at its core, beating slowly like a warning. Inside the shuttle, Rollick felt it too, the energy growing. The countdown had stopped, but something else had started. It was not counting to zero, it was waiting for a choice. He looked at the chair again, and he knew this was never about an explosion or a trap. It was about waking something up, something asleep for so long that even Earth had forgotten it. He turned to his team. "Get ready," he said. "We are not here to fight. We are part of a story that began long before us." and something very old just opened its eyes. They gathered around the machine, not knowing what to do, but feeling that anything they touched might end or begin something bigger than war. And then the shuttle spoke again, not in voice, but in light. The patterns on the walls came alive, forming a map, a path across the stars, and at the end of that path, a symbol that only one race would understand. Earth. The signal burst out of the shuttle silent, an invisible passing through space faster than any wave, faster than any message going home to a place where only one person was waiting. Admiral Rourke stood on the command tower back on Earth, holding the same device again. It buzzed once, then twice, then burned bright in his hand. He looked at the sky above and whispered 3 words with a heavy voice. It has begun. Behind him, deep below the oceans, something massive shifted for the first time in centuries. It turned slowly, opening its eyes made of steel and fire and memory, waiting for the signal, waiting for the call it had been promised so long ago. The Crixer Command Center, above the world of Drexos Prime, was in chaos. Screens flickered, red and gold voices shouted across the bridge, and the image of the human shuttle hovered in the center of the room, spinning slowly in silence, as if mocking them. Admiral Varnock stared at the hologram with burning eyes, his fists tight at his sides, his fangs bared, and his heart racing with something far stronger than anger. It was fear, and it was growing fast. I want answers, he roared. This thing destroyed control over half our fleet without firing a single shot. I want to know how, I want to know why, and I want to know who. The officers around him scrambled to respond, scanning logs, rerunning footage, calling out to other systems, but nothing worked. The entire fleet had been silenced for 30 full minutes, and though power had returned to a few systems, the main drives were still offline, the weapons were still locked, and the data recorders showed nothing but static during the moment of the burst. It makes no sense, one officer said. We have no record of any human ship with this kind of tech. Not even their warships could create an energy field like that. And the shuttle itself is not even registered on their public databases. It is a ghost. Then it is alive, Varnock hissed. They built it in secret, and now they dare to send it into our space to test us, to shame us. Another voice spoke from the shadows of the command bridge. It was low and calm, and very old. You do not understand what you have seen, Admiral Varnock. You think this is new, but it is not. The room turned toward the speaker. It was Lord Vexen, the Empire's historian and keeper of the old records. He wore no armor, only dark robes, and a single glowing stone around his neck. He had not spoken to the High Command in decades until now. This shuttle is not a new weapon, he said, stepping forward. It is a memory, a message from the past that should never have been disturbed. Varnock growled. Explain yourself. Many centuries ago, before even the Crixer Empire rose from the ashes of the Outer Wars, there were whispers among the stars of human ships built not by scientists, but by survivors, weapons made not for conquest, but for protection, born in silence, hidden in darkness. They called them sentinels. The officers stared, some confused, some amused, but Lord Vexen continued, without fear. These ships were not many, maybe only 7, maybe less, each one built with old codes and ancient metal, each one connected to a forgotten network buried deep within Earth, and all of them sleeping, waiting for a call that had never come until now. So you believe this shuttle is part of that forgotten network? Varnock asked, but that makes no sense. How could humans forget their own weapons? Because they wanted peace, said Lord Vexen. They sealed the past. They erased the blueprints. They buried the sentinels under oceans and ice and silence, because they knew that if the galaxy ever remembered what they could truly build, no one would trust them again. Varnock stood in silence, his claws tapping on the edge of the console, and then he turned to the comms officer. Open a line to Earth. I want to speak to their high command now. Across space on Earth, in a tall, quiet building above the clouds, Admiral Rourke stood alone at a large glass window, his hands behind his back, his uniform clean and simple, his eyes locked on the sky. Behind him, the door opened, and a young officer walked in. Sir, the Crixer are demanding a response. They claim we sent a weapon into their space. They say it attacked them without warning, and they're calling for war. Rourke did not turn, his voice calm as still water. And what do we say? The officer hesitated. Sir, we have no record of any shuttle sent to that region, at least not from the official channels. But we detected a signal from the crash zone, a signal coded in ancient Earth dialect older than any of our current systems. Then we say nothing, Rourke replied, finally turning to face the room. Let them believe what they wish, let them be afraid if they must, but do not speak of the signal, do not mention the name. The officer blinked. The name, sir. Rourke nodded. The name of the warship that sleeps beneath our oceans, the one we promised never to wake again. You mean the Aegis, sir? Yes, Rourke said, and his voice became heavy with memory. The Aegis. The shuttle was never a weapon, it was a key, it was a call. And now that the call has been sent, the one who answers it will come soon, and nothing in the galaxy will stop it. In deep space, the Krixer continued to prepare their fleets, their engines roaring, their weapons charging, but in the heart of their fear, something darker began to grow. Some believed the humans were weak, some believed the humans were soft, but none had ever seen what happened when humanity decided to wake up. On the far side of Earth, the oceans moved though no wind touched them. The tides pulled without the moon, and deep below, the crust metal eyes opened in the dark pressure of the deep, and systems began to power up that had not run in over 200 years. The Aegis did not wake with sound, it woke with thought. It stretched through fiber and steel and memory. It reconnected with parts of itself long hidden in the Earth's magnetic field, in ancient satellites and cold comets waiting at the edge of the solar system. It remembered its name, and it remembered its purpose. Protect humanity at all cost. Back on Drexo's Prime, Varnock slammed his fist on the console. If the humans will not answer, then we send a strike force, we destroy the shuttle, we take control of the crash zone, and we show them that the Krixer do not bow to tricks and games. Lord Vexen stepped forward again. You can destroy the shuttle if you wish, Admiral, but the message has already been sent, and you cannot destroy what is already awake. Varnock ignored him. Prepare the ships. He said, this time we bring the full fleet. In the dark silence of the galaxy, somewhere between Earth and Drexos, a ripple moved through space like a wave pushed by something massive, something that was no longer just waiting. The Aegis had locked onto the signal, and now it was moving. It did not use hyperspace. It did not flash through wormholes. It simply shifted reality around itself, bending the stars and dragging space behind like a great cloak of forgotten power. Its hull carried scars from battles no one remembered. Its systems were made from things no longer understood. Its voice was not a voice at all, but a song carried through the emptiness of space. And it was heading toward the Krixer fleet, not to speak, not to warn, but to remind the galaxy of a single truth. Humanity may sleep, but it never forgets. The stars above Earth shimmered in silence, while the oceans below held their breath, as if the entire planet knew something had changed, something old had stirred, and now something ancient was listening. In a secret chamber far beneath the command tower, Admiral Rourke stood in front of a black screen that showed no data, no map, no light, only darkness. But behind that darkness was a signal, soft, steady, and waiting to be answered. The signal came from a shuttle, but it was not a normal distress call. It was not a warning or a beacon. It was a voice speaking in a forgotten code, a pattern of pulses that matched no current system, no modern network. Only the deep layers of Earth's most guarded history still responded to it. The chamber itself was cold and quiet, filled with dust and silence. Metal walls curved in strange ways, and strange symbols marked every corner. It was not built like the rest of the Earth Alliance structure. It felt older, like it came from another time, maybe even another planet. Rourke placed his hand on the glass and closed his eyes. The signal continued to pulse, slow and steady, calling to something beyond human reach, but still part of human design and memory. He opened his mouth, but said nothing because there were no words strong enough to hold what he felt at that moment, a feeling like standing in the shadow of a giant, a sleeping giant that had just turned in its slumber. Behind him a voice spoke softly. It was General Halden, a friend from an old war, someone who also remembered the stories, the ones never written in history files. So it has begun, Halden said, his voice low and filled with a weight he did not try to hide. Yes, Rourke replied. Without moving, the shuttle triggered the signal. And now the system is waking, the codes are unlocking, and the sleeper is preparing to rise. Halden stepped closer, looking at the black screen. You really believe the Aegis will respond? After all this time, after so many years buried in the deep, forgotten by its own makers. It was never truly asleep, Rourke said. It was waiting for the right frequency, the right moment. and the right threat. The shuttle was not just bait, it was the key, activated the first lock, and now the old network is opening door by door. Halden frowned and crossed his arms. If the Crixer understand what is coming, they will strike first, and strike hard. They still think the shuttle was an attack. They believe we launched it on purpose to test them. Let them believe what they wish. Rourke answered. What comes next will not be about belief. It will be about truth, and the truth is far more dangerous than fear. Far beneath the ocean, something moved, not with sound, but with energy. A massive shape rested under layers of rock and water, shielded by ice and time, wrapped in silence and darkness. It was not a ship in the way most people understood. It was a sentinel built with a purpose, carved from materials now extinct, guided by systems no longer taught in any school. Its body shaped like a beast from another age, all sharp lines and glowing veins, its core filled with power that no one had measured for centuries. The Aegis was not just a weapon. It was a message, a reminder of what Earth could become when pushed, when threatened, when called to stand again. And now it had been called. Inside its mind, systems that had once linked to ancient satellites flared to life. Messages traveled through hidden tunnels beneath the crust. Energy flowed into coils that had been cold for lifetimes. The Aegis stretched through circuits and memories and began to rise. On Drexo's Prime, Admiral Varnock stood aboard the Crixer flagship, staring at the broken wreckage of a shuttle, which now floated powerless and dead in the hangar, yet still something about it felt alive, even in silence. Technicians worked around the shuttle, carefully, afraid to touch it. Without orders, scanners continued to fail. Readings shifted every minute. Nothing held still long enough to study. It is not a ship, one of the techs said, softly, more like a seed or a code, or maybe a living thing pretending to be a shuttle. Varnock narrowed his eyes, then leaned close and whispered, "Who sent you? What did you wake?" Back on Earth, the black screen changed for the first time in over 200 years, not with light, but with motion. Lines began to curve and swirl across the surface, forming shapes that had not been seen since the old wars, before peace, before silence. Halden stepped back, his eyes wide. Rourke, that is a flight path. That is not just a signal, it is a launch sequence. Rourke nodded, and his voice grew hard. Then, let it launch. We may not control it anymore, but we are still part of its purpose. The chamber trembled faintly under their feet. Nothing loud, nothing sharp, just a slow, heavy movement, like something ancient turning in bed, like something vast preparing to rise. In the oceans, the water boiled, but not from heat. The pressure changed, currents shifted, animals fled, ships turned away. Without warning, all sensors failed for just a second, then returned with strange readings, as if gravity itself had bent in place. The Aegis began to move. Across the stars near the edge of Crixer space, a deep hum passed through subspace, not a sound, but a presence, a signature that old machines on forgotten moons began to register. Screens lit up with codes that made no sense to modern readers, patterns from a time before alliances, before colonies, before the galaxy knew Earth. At the Crixer front lines, ships started to lose signal for a split. Second, systems blinked, then returned, but with warning. Shields dropped and rose again. Targeting sensors spun without targets, weapons reloaded without orders. The officers reported the disturbance as a solar wave, but deep in his gut, Varnock knew it was not the sun. It was something else, something far older and far more dangerous than fire. One ship picked up a shape moving beyond the edge of space. No drive signature, no heat, no light, but moving faster than physics allowed. Silent and massive and cold, like a mountain floating through the void. They tried to scan it, but the data melted into static. They tried to follow it, but their systems shut down again, just like before when the shuttle had released its energy burst. Varnock shouted orders: prepare the fleet, defend the zone. Nothing passes without our command. Nothing touches our space again. But the shape was not listening. On Earth, Admiral Rourke stood once more before the black screen, now glowing with faint gold lines, forming the shape of a ship that did not exist on any registry, but lived in the minds of those who still remembered. He turned to Halden and gave the final order: we do not follow, we do not command, we only witness, and when the time comes we remember. The Aegis passed out of Earth's gravity, pulling behind it a cloak of ancient power and purpose. It moved through space like a shadow that bent time itself, and behind it came silence, the kind of silence that falls before something breaks. The Krixer fleet stood ready in the edge of Sector 9, a long line of warships dark and sharp like blades cutting through space, engines humming power, flowing weapons locked, and eyes watching the void. Admiral Varnock walked the bridge of the command ship. Known as the fangs of fire, his hands behind his back, his claws tapping against the polished floor, his breath calm, but his mind burning with questions and warnings. He did not trust the silence, he did not trust the space between stars, and most of all, he did not trust the humans. They had said nothing after the shuttle had been captured, no response, no defense, no words at all, and in that silence, Varnock had found something worse than defiance. He had found confidence. Across the main display, the stars stretched wide and cold. Nothing moved, nothing blinked. Then a low pulse hit the outer sensors, not sound, not energy, just pressure like space itself had taken a breath. Varnock froze, the crew froze, the fleet froze. Then they saw it. It did not arrive with light or sound or flame. It did not tear open space or flash across the void like normal ships. It was simply there 1 second, empty stars, next second, a shape, a shadow, a monster. The warship did not look like any design ever seen by Krixer eyes. It was smooth and sharp all at once, with armor darker than black, a skin of metal that shimmered with old scars and old secrets. It moved with weight. It moved with silence. It moved like death. "That is no human ship," whispered one of the Krixer officers. "That is something else, something from the old myths." "It is the Aegis," Varnock said, his voice low like a growl, his eyes locked on the screen. "And I think we made a mistake." The warship was massive, far larger than any ship the Krixer had ever built. Its engines did not glow, its weapons did not shine, it had no signal, no ID, no words. But it was not hiding, it was not trying to pretend to be anything else. It simply existed, and its existence was enough to freeze the fleet. Suddenly, a single Krixer cruiser powered up, its weapons out of fear, out of reflex, out of command. No one knew. It fired one shot, a blast of pure energy, aimed at the strange ship, hoping to strike first and claim victory. The beam hit the warship and vanished. No flare, no explosion, no damage. The Aegis did not move, did not flinch, did not respond. Then it spoke. Not in words, not in voice, but in thought. Every Krixer mind on every ship heard the same message, not with ears, but in their blood. "This is Earth's warning, leave now." Some screamed, some dropped to their knees, some tried to pull the wires from their heads, but the message did not stop. It echoed again, slow and deep and final. "This is Earth's warning, leave now." Admiral Varnock stood silent, his hands shaking, his breath uneven. He wanted to give the order to fire. He wanted to prove his strength, to strike first, to end the fear. But before he could speak, the Aegis moved. It did not fly, it did not jump, it shifted forward like gravity bent around it, like the universe made room for its path. A second cruiser tried to flee. It turned its engines to full power and aimed for deep space. The Aegis fired one pulse, no light, no heat, no flash, just a ripple, a wave that passed through the cruiser, and the cruiser was gone. No fire, no wreckage, no sound. It simply ceased to exist. The Krixer fleet went silent again. Back on Earth, Admiral Rourke watched the feed from the old network, a soft image made from pulses and patterns, not cameras, not visuals, just impressions and readings, old systems speaking to old minds. "It is awake," he said softly. "It has judged the threat, and it has acted." General Halden stood beside him, wide-eyed and pale. "And what now?" he asked. "Do we stop it? Do we send orders?" "We do nothing," Rourke replied. "This is not our war. This is our warning. And if they do not listen, then the Aegis will do what it was built to do." Far above the Krixer ships, the stars shifted again, and more shadows appeared. Not ships, not allies, not reinforcements, just reflections of the Aegis copies, maybe, or echoes, or parts of the same mind. No one could say. They surrounded the fleet without a word, without a sound. Each one different in shape, but carrying the same weight, the same silence, the same message. The Krixer officers cried out, some begged for retreat, others reached for escape pods, some tried to fight each other. Panic spread like fire, and discipline fell like glass. Varnock stared into the void and saw his empire reflected back at him, not in pride, not in glory, but in fear and failure. "We called them weak," he whispered. "We called them slow and soft and broken, but they were never broken. They were sleeping. One of his captains screamed into the comms, "They are sending a final charge. They will destroy us all. We must strike. Now, Admiral, we must, or we are lost." Varnock looked once more at the warship and felt something strange, not anger, not pride, not even fear, something deeper, something colder. Regret. He lowered his hand and spoke into the fleet channel. "This is Varnock of the Crixer. You are to hold your fire. You are to stand down. You are to survive." Some did not listen. Some ships fired anyway, and the Aegis responded each time with one pulse, one breath, one memory, and those ships vanished like dust in a storm. The rest of the fleet turned away in silence, drifting back through the stars, not defeated by weapons, not beaten by numbers, but undone by the truth. The humans had sent no fleet. The humans had spoken no threat. The humans had awakened an old guardian, and now the galaxy would never see them the same way again. The Aegis did not follow. The Aegis did not chase. It simply watched until the last ship had gone. Then it turned back toward Earth and vanished, without motion, without noise, without trace. And across the galaxy, from the smallest colony to the greatest throne, the same message echoed again and again, passed from whisper to rumor to law. Do not test Earth. The stars burned quietly once more as the Crixer fleet limped away from the edge of destruction. Engines, flickering holes, cracked minds, shattered by something they could not understand, something that did not fight with fire, but with presence, something that did not roar, but whispered, and the whisper was louder than any weapon. Admiral Varnock sat alone in his private chamber, his claws trembling, his eyes locked on a single screen that now showed nothing but static. The image of the warship had faded, but its shape was burned into his mind, a shape that would not leave no matter how hard he tried to forget. He had faced many battles before. He had defeated great enemies and crushed rebellions. He had walked through fire and ruled through fear, but nothing in his long life had prepared him for silence that speaks louder than war. Across the galaxy, others listened as the story spread from ship to ship, from world to world, carried by frightened voices and broken messages. They spoke of the black ship, the ancient one, the one that did not fire unless you dare to speak first, the one that made entire fleets vanish without a trace. And they spoke of the message, the voice that entered minds without sound, the cold, calm warning that now echoed across every known system. This is Earth's warning, leave now. Some laughed at first. Some said it was a trick, a story for children, a tale to control the wild. But those who had seen the Aegis with their own eyes did not laugh. They only watched the sky with quiet breath and waited. Back on Earth, Admiral Rourke stood before the world assembly, a massive chamber made of steel and glass high above the blue oceans, a place where leaders from every human colony had gathered in fear and confusion. The screens around the chamber showed only one image, the same one that came from the deep watchers, the Aegis leaving the battle, not to chase, not to destroy, not to conquer, but to return home silent, as ever silent as death. Rourke raised his hand, and the room fell into quiet. What you witnessed was not a weapon of attack, he said slowly. What you witnessed was the last promise of Earth to itself and to the stars. We did not build the Aegis to conquer, we built it to remind. To remind others what happens when peace is mistaken for weakness, to remind the galaxy that we do not start wars, but we do remember how to end them. Gasps echoed through the chamber, murmurs passed like waves, and a few stood in protest, their voices sharp with fear. You woke something we buried. They said you brought back shadows from an age of fire and ruin, and now you show it to the stars again. Why? Because the stars forgot, Rourke answered, and now they remember. The assembly went silent once more as Rourke stepped back, and the screen behind him changed again, this time not to the image of the warship, but to a simple symbol, a golden circle crossed by 7 lines, the mark of the Sentinel program, long erased from Earth's history, but never deleted from Earth's soul. Below the oceans, deep within the vaults of old Earth, the Aegis returned to sleep, systems powering down, locks sealing once more, not in fear, but in duty. It had seen the threat, it had sent the message, and now it rested again, waiting as it always had, as it always would. In the black between stars, traders told the tale. With trembling voices, pirates whispered it in dark bars, soldiers passed it through encrypted files, and every government, every empire, every species began to look at Earth not with greed or disdain, but with caution, with respect, with something close to fear. The message was not a bluff, it was not a show, it was truth. and the truth had returned wearing steel and silence. On the distant world of Ixen, where the Union of 12 debated matters of war and expansion, a great leader named Telrados stood before his council, holding a recording from a spy ship that had barely escaped the battle near Drexos. He played it once, and then again, the same 5 words spoken not with voice but burned into the mind like a scar. This is Earth's warning, leave now. He turned to his council, his voice steady. We will not touch Earth, he said, and we will not move near their space, and we will not speak of them again unless we speak with care. The council nodded without argument, because they had seen what happens when Earth whispers. Back on the moon base Luna Prime, a young cadet named Lyra watched the files from the Aegis, her eyes wide with wonder, her breath slow, as she took in the scale the power, the ancient beauty of the ship. Her instructor stood behind her, arms crossed, voice calm. Do you understand now? He asked. This is not just technology. This is memory. This is the soul of a people who were nearly broken once and decided they never would be again. Lyra nodded slowly. I understand, she said, and one day I want to serve on the Aegis. No one serves the Aegis, the instructor replied, not in the way you think it chooses. When it rises, it chooses. When it speaks, it chooses. When it reminds. And when it does, the galaxy listens. Far beyond Earth, in quiet rooms on silent stations, hidden deep in the black, other sentinels listened to their systems, old, but not dead, their cores warm, but not bright. They had heard the signal, they had seen the light, and they had remembered their names. The Aegis was not alone, it never had been. But Earth had only sent one message this time, and the others stayed, quiet, still watching, still waiting, because one voice had been enough, and now the stars would be careful with the voice of Earth. In the great city of Terran, a monument was raised, not of war, not of fire, but of silence, a tall black tower with no words, no plaque, no glory, only 7 rings carved into its side, one for each sentinel, one for each promise. People came from every corner of the Earth and its colonies to stand before the tower, to touch the cold surface, and feel not pride, not fear, but something older, something deeper. Understanding. The stars had changed, and Earth had reminded them why. The stars no longer felt the same after the Aegis moved, after the warning echoed, after the fleets turned back, and fear replaced ambition. Space itself seemed slower, colder, quieter, not from battle, not from fire, but from something even deeper, from respect. News of the encounter traveled fast across systems, old and new, spread by freighters, diplomats, smugglers, warriors, scholars, and wanderers. They all spoke of the black ship that came from nowhere, the voice that reached into minds and hearts and stopped war without a single scream, without a single cry. Some called it a god, some called it a ghost, but those who truly understood called it what it was: a promise, a warning, a memory built of steel and silence. On Earth, the world kept turning. People returned to work, children played on green fields, and oceans sang their waves to empty beaches, but somewhere deep in the bones of the planet the silence hummed with something new, not fear, not sorrow, not celebration, but awareness. Admiral Rourke stood on a quiet hill outside the capital, where a new monument had been placed, a single stone tall and smooth, without symbols, without names, just standing there alone like the ship it honored. Behind him, families, it took photos, soldiers stood with hands behind their backs, and teachers told young student stories written only in whispers. A child asked, "Is it real, the black ship, the big one that made the scary aliens run away?" Rourke turned and smiled softly. "It is real," he said, "and it is not just big, it is awake, and it is watching." Above, in orbit, Luna Prime Station drifted slowly across the stars. Engineers upgraded its system, scientists studied old archive, soldiers trained with sharper focus. Everyone worked with one thought in mind: if the signal ever returned, they would be ready, not to control, not to command, but to understand. The Aegis had taught them that power without purpose is noise, and purpose without memory is blindness. And now memory had returned to Earth, wrapped in silence, armored in patience, and carried on the back of something too old to explain. Far from Earth, in the quiet black between systems, a single trade ship floated past a derelict moon. Its scanners picked up an anomaly deep within the rock, something that pulsed, something that hummed. The captain leaned forward and saw the faint outline of something hidden under dust, metal, old, strange, and shaped like the Aegis, but smaller, sleeping, not dead. They marked the coordinates, then turned away faster than normal engines should allow. The stars seemed too quiet, and they had no wish to wake anything more. Back on Drexo's prime, Admiral Varnock no longer walked with pride. His steps were slower, his voice more thoughtful, his claws remained sheathed. Even in meetings, his empire now looked inward, no longer pushing outward, no longer reaching for the edge of human space, not because of weakness, but because of the truth they had faced. His officers still spoke of rebuilding, of strategy, of strength. But Varnock spoke of respect and patience. He spoke of peace not from surrender, but from wisdom earned under the shadow of a ship that did not speak yet said everything. In a hidden part of Crixer space, where old veterans gathered to remember lost battles and drink to fading glory, a new toast was created, not for victory, not for blood, but for silence, for the ship that needed no fleet, for the people who needed no words. They raised their cups and whispered, Earth does not forget, and the stars never sleep. On Mars, under red skies, a small team of researchers uncovered strange markings in the ruins of an ancient colony older than the current settlements, far older, maybe even from the time before the Aegis first slept. They found 7 symbols carved into the rock, matching the pattern on the Sentinel signal, matching the lines drawn by memory, and whispers. They looked at each other and said, maybe the past is not behind us, maybe it walks beside us, waiting to be seen again. In a classroom floating near Jupiter, a young girl named Talia wrote a poem on her digital slate, her eyes full of light, her words slow and careful. She wrote of a ship without name, of a sky without end, of a silence that could roar louder than thunder. She wrote of Earth not as a planet, but as a soul wrapped in blue and guarded by a shadow. Her teacher read it and smiled and said, "You understand more than most." And the girl nodded and whispered, "I think it understands us too." In deep space, where comets danced and suns flickered out, another ship stirred deep within the crust of a dead planet. Systems blinked once, then faded again, not ready, not yet, but aware, as if the Aegis had spoken not only to its enemies, but to its brothers, as if the old Sentinels had heard the signal and remembered who they were. And so the galaxy changed, not with war, not with conquest, but with silence. Not because of fear, but because of truth. Earth was never weak, it was never sleeping, it was only remembering. And now the stars remembered too. In the cold halls of the United Earth Defense Archive, a final message was added to the deep code, a message written in old Terran script, a message that would stay locked until needed again. It read, "If they come again, if they forget again, if they ever think we are small again, wake the Aegis, not to fight, but to remind. Because peace without memory is a story lost to time. And Earth does not forget.